Gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Bridenstine, is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Serving on this committee is a high privilege, especially because we have the opportunity to discuss things like this with this amazing panel. So thank you all for being here. Before I get started on Moon, Mars, I think that's an important discussion, but I want to say the first time I had a conversation with Lieutenant General Stafford, I was running the Tulsa Air and Space Museum. I had just left the United States Navy as a pilot, and here I am at this museum. We made an effort, Mr. Chairman, to get a space shuttle in the city of Tulsa. And we had a long history with the shuttle. We built the bay doors on the space shuttle. We had built the shuttle carrier aircraft, the 747 that carries the shuttle on its back, was modified in Tulsa. We built the big devices that pick the shuttle up and make it vertical for the launch stack. NASA said you needed a 10,000-foot runway to have a shuttle on display at your museum. You need a museum dedicated to education. So we made this effort to go after a shuttle. And I was pretty new at the museum at the time, and I get this call, and my staffer comes in and says, General Tom Stafford is on the phone for you. And I said, yeah, and the Easter Bunny's online too, right? And of course, General Tom Stafford was on the board of directors for the National Museum of the U.S. Air Force. And he wanted to let me know that the U.S. Air Force Museum was going to be getting a shuttle and not the Tulsa Air and Space Museum. I'm sad to report, sir, that neither one of us got a space shuttle. But it was a great conversation, and I appreciate you being from Oklahoma. If none of you if you've ever been to Oklahoma, if you ever get a chance to go to Oklahoma, I highly recommend visiting the Tom Stafford Museum. You're doing a lot to inspire the young generation in Oklahoma, and thank you for all your great work there. I want to talk for a second about this Moon Mars thing because I think it's important. While we all want to go to the moon, and certainly with my friend from Colorado, Mr. Perlmutter, 2033, great goal. I think it ought to be 2032. I think most Republicans agree with the 2032 number. But while that's important, there's also, and I've heard Dr. Schmidt and Lieutenant General Stafford talk about the geopolitical issues here, the fact that there is a soft power element here. We know what China is doing. They're launching taikonauts on Chinese rockets to their own Chinese space station. Not too long ago, they put an orbiter around the moon to map the moon. After a year of mapping the moon, they launched it deeper into space to the L2 point, 60,000 kilometers on the backside of the moon, where it shut down and just hovered for a period of 8 months before repowering and flying into deep space in formation with an asteroid. That is a massive achievement, an accomplishment that is astonishing. We also know that the Chinese have launched direct ascent anti-satellite weapons, one that in fact shot down one of their own satellites, creating a space debris field of 3,000 pieces. We also know that they are currently testing anti-satellite weapons all the way out to geostationary orbit, where our most important communication satellites, AEHF, or nuclear command and control communications, WGS. For those of us that are tactical operators, we depend on WGS. And of course, all of our space-based infrared systems to detect missile launches, all in that very important orbital regime out there in geostationary orbit. The Chinese have demonstrated, if not the desire, they have at least demonstrated the capacity to attack that geostationary orbit from above. And that is a critical concern that everybody on this committee should be taking note of because of the situational awareness limitations that we have in deep space. So when we think about the moon and when we think about Mars, we all want to get to Mars in 2033. I think that's a great objective. I will also say that cislunar is critically important for the geopolitical position of the United States of America. And the Mars is the horizon goal. It's critical. We need to get there. The moon, I believe, is necessary. And Dr. Schmidt, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second because you've talked about how it's possible that the U.S. government could, in essence, provide transportation to not only lunar orbit but to the lunar surface, and have the private invest in developing not only the moon but the capacity for cislunar, which is a geopolitical concern right now for the United States. Can you address how we could leverage commercial in that realm?
Well, I've been convinced for a long time, Congressman, that ultimately, the private sector can truly commercial, as Tom has pointed out, truly commercial, for-profit, exploit the the resources of the lunar surface. The part of the lunar surface called the regolith, which is a debris layer that covers the moon that's several meters thick, that contains hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, and helium, and particularly this fusion fuel called helium-3. So the only basis I'm aware of for a truly commercial operation is in lunar resources, and both for use in space and for use here on Earth. And if the government is, as it is right now, is moving towards developing heavy lift launch vehicles, then that opens the door, I think, for this partnership to really be a viable one. And I talk to people about it all the time, obviously, and we'll just have to wait and see whether the investor community or the energy community step up and realize that this long-term potential is there.
Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bridenstine.